thing about Town Portal Arcade, that is sayable is probably one of the most fun insights in Taoist thinking. So you have to get the idea of a brush. Okay, so there's a talking or saying brush, and there's a thinking brush that I've essentially had or been picking up to use. The thinking brush began in something I call the Zen Paradox chapter that founds the whole thing. Like, that's the first brush for thinking about this insight. But then the saying brush is when you start unpacking the insight of what you're thinking about, or what, if you want to pull the phrasing using the reference point you. I like the reference point you because it's the second person perspective. I really enjoy the second person perspective. I've been playing first person perspective video games for all my life pretty much, and third person fixed perspective, but second person saying perspective is using the term you to address somebody later. The phrase you is addressing the listener, the second person who's entered the discussion. So it's not literally you, it's the next participant. You is the placeholder representing the next participant. And so when you are thinking, the next participant is yourself later. So if you progress to actual saying, like the actual interaction of an additional participant, which is what's constituted by saying, because for it to be saying, it only is so once received by the second participant. So the insight, the fun insight, I would call this, in the Taoist thinking and then saying, those two brushes, is the fact of a technology or an invention. In Taoism, the idea that architecture, the structure of a device or a machine, is identical in full identical perpetuity of like a toy or a business, an object that is usable, like an object you can apply an output that's visible, is the same thing. A toy or a machine or a business, like all of these structures are just literally that same Taoist thing. Like the actuality of it. Its actuality is what it defines it as, an object, like a thing that exists. You got some sub insights on this that I hear on philosophical oriented YouTuber personality, etc., saying anything that is not in alignment, that which is not in alignment with infinite abundance, isn't real. It's not actually manifested in reality. What is manifested in reality, and this is the fundamental Taoist premise or think brush, like the fundamental Taoist thing to think about, is the fact that what is so of itself. It arises together with all the rest of itself. So that what I meant when I diverted to talk about the second person phrase you, like with there being a you, what I mean is the discussion, the me and you. And when you say of itself so, and what is arising of itself all together at once, you're removing the need to talk about a you like me for yourself, because it's not really by itself, it's with the other, it's with everyone else too. So the us arising together is your fundamental Taoist thing, through which we can understand the actuality, the actually manifested truth of what is so, what is arising. And so with that thought, you can think about an invention, a toy, an object, which is a structure that you can witness, something that occurs and then reoccurs. all that happens continues happening. It happens, and if it wasn't happening in a continuing way, you wouldn't witness it ever. It wouldn't be happening at all. Any happening is evidence of a repeat. Happening. With this fundamental idea, you can get to, this is my point, to get to my point, the saying brush that you arrive at. Yo, what's up, Matt? So the point I'm getting to here is the saying brush. What can I say with this brush now? And it's this. There's like a perfect feeling. There's a perfection point sensation in the Zen way of being a business, the Zen way of acting through a profession, like just repeating it for its own enjoyment, like for the goodness of the activity itself, which is your doing, that constitutes what your business is, what your profession is. Like your profession is Zen, and for me it's a hyperfixation. Like I center my entire life on the activity. I couldn't live in it if I couldn't do that. There's a sensation of satisfaction there that I've recently scanned as a Taoist feeling about being a patron, like a customer, a patron of a service, like of anything that has value. So like I'm talking about the food shop mythos here specifically, like the idea of a master food maker and their food shop, and then all of the participants in that process. There's like a satisfying egalitarianism about being a patron in that shop, and I think of myself as a patron in there, even if I'm going there to get the item and take it to somebody else. I'm still experiencing the patronage of the shop, and there's a sunlight feeling about the patronage feeling for the structure that is a food shop, and that structures thing is what I started out talking about, the idea of an invention or a toy or a machine, anything which we can pick it up and say you can operate this, or this operates, and here's the output, the beneficial object's output. And so like a toy or like a motor vehicle are the same thing, and so is a food shop, and so is like all of this. Anything you can participate in that makes you included and makes you part of the mutual arising of the item itself, the benefit. There's a feeling of a nice, like, natural egalitarianism, like the way that the sunlight shines on everything and everything gets its energy. The everythingness about it, I guess. The suchness specifically invokes the unity of being with the other beings and with the entire process that brings these things forth is exhibited when we have customers in a food shop. So what I mean, I started this to say the whole thing about Town Portal Arcade is that the sunlight of the concept of being a town and having a town center that is a place for refuge fundamentally says that insight about the Tao, it nourishes all things and doesn't lord that over them. So the whole idea of the Taoist coin is just an object that expresses the unity. It brings together the user and the maker and the participants, the patrons, as it were, all together. It brings that forth into being. And Town Portal Arcade is the brush object that manifests that as a town structure, a town building that exists, that is manifested and obviously witnessable in reality, that keeps itself going, is keeping its good thing going for the purpose of what the good thing actually is, like the food, feeding the people in the town, etc. Like all the things that people could be included in if they wanted to, like all voluntary participants. The coin does that. It's the object to allow the town portal structure to happen. It's just a coin. It's just a little piece of transacting token that you can walk in and pick up, and it's funded, as it were, by the fact that objects, toys, machines, inventions, mechanisms, there's an aspect of keeping itself going, because it's good to keep going, and all things that are manifesting of itself do so in such a way that they keep itself going. It kind of goes into a perpetual motion fun about it. There's a fundamental sunlight joy about this when you use the Taoism brush to think all the way through and then convert it into a sayable thing that people are participating in together. That's what it is. That's where I arrived at Town Portal Arcade. So when Alan Watts says we have to get rid of the mythology of money to get sane technology going, that's what he meant. When I heard him say that sentence, that's, I think, the moment that any of my abstract Zen paradox thinking brush things converted into something you can say, something that exists as a sayable structure or invention, which is the arcade, the token that's powering it, and the concept of we don't place an imaginary rule called debt on top of the users of this coin, because it doesn't actually exist. There's no way to actually use force in that way. So the fundamental idea that you do not force is then just applied to the item called a coin. And then you've got, those are the fundamental thing. That's the equation exactly. Do not force multiplied by the invention that allows all forms of business, not relying on I have to trade you an object I have right now for what you have right now. So coin becomes mystical at that point. It becomes like a portal circle, not just a circular piece of plastic. It is now like an infinity portal. And that's what Town Portal Arcade does, or is. It shows us that. Like as a business, as an invention that should exist, and its business is manifesting itself over and over in 3D. Like the repeat actions is what brings it into 3D. The fact that everybody can come there and eat food every day, like lunch money. That's what a Taoist coin is. It's lunch money. And to include everybody in that is following the fundamental fact of Wu Wei and of Zira, of itself so. And that's what he means by getting rid of the mythology of money. The mythology, he means the suggestion that you have to qualify, like the idea of creditworthiness or of where's the money going to come from. That's the question he constantly criticizes when you listen to the Alan Watts content about money. He criticizes anybody who asks that question because he basically points out money doesn't come from somewhere. If it comes from anywhere, it comes from the same place we go when we die. It comes from later, man, into now. It doesn't come from a particular thing. It isn't manifested by something specific. Its only purpose is to point to the future value flow that would allow me and you to do any form of business, resulting in a beneficial object of some form of value adding that doesn't rely on you swapping me something you already have at this second for the thing I'm going to give you in exchange for it. So it doesn't come from somewhere. There's not something exchanged for it in the fundamental basic. It's just a means of saying the transaction. So it goes back to that same me and you fact. The transaction exists because there's two. It's a dual process. It's bool. Like there's two, and that's the reason why. That's what the coin does. It's the thing describing the me and you activity. So in my mind, it started to look like a coin is being held by two people at once, and it can't exist if only one person is holding it. It only exists while both hands are touching it. And it's manifested by the action of the two or more cooperation. And the beneficial cooperation. So the mythology is all of this stuff attached to it, like, oh, we got it from gold, we got it because we harvested gold, etc., etc. No, we didn't get it from nothing. We got it because of the actual activity of participation of the user and the person who produces it, like the beneficiary and the holder, the steward of the benefit, the person who's holding the benefit, and then the beneficiary who is able to receive it. Let's drop this off. Leave the door on the right side by the Subaru. Okay, I see the Subaru, so let's figure this out. Be right back. moved a couple spaces away from there, but I think that's essentially what they meant. Is that walkway on the right edge. Those are my comments on getting rid of the mythology of money. The part we have to get rid of is the part that exerts debt. Exerts like an onus on the usage of it to count up how many have been used and then go get something somewhere else to pay back that debt. You just don't do that. That just doesn't exist in the Taoist. The correct, clear view of what Taoist view reveals, that there's no such thing. Like, you wouldn't count all the transactions up and then say, now go over here and get somebody to pay. The only way you would actually do that is the way I have Town Portal Arcade set up, is we would total up the transactions done with the coins that we just let people pick up for free. We would total those up and say, here's what our expenses were, here's what our operating totals were. And then we would basically build a town and a city in some sort of you would think of it like a utility bill kind of a thing. We would total it up so that it's paid for in that way after we did all the business for like a 30-day period or whatever. And then go charge the city budget or the town, like, treasury, essentially. That's the only way you would do it. You would start it with the transaction. And the mythology part is that we're not doing that currently. We're saying money comes from some other way, and then there's a place that's holding all the gold coins, and you go there, and you make your deposits, and then you withdraw paper money after you've deposited your original deposit. Like, that part is the bad mythology that we need to get rid of. Because it puts the cart before the horse. What you actually have to do is put the horse first, which literally is the activity of the essential work, the activity of people having lunch, the activity of a shelter being there for people to sleep at night. Like, you get to all of this when you think about the Zen koan that says, when hungry eat and when tired rest. You start there, and then you start saying, okay, so we're getting rid of the mythology of money by doing this, by saying these sayings, and saying there's no barrier to entry except the user who's doing it, participating in doing it. There's nothing that stops it from happening except for the person not doing it. But the mythology of money is the thing stopping it. It's the reason why everything is currently rigged by the obsolete structure called the bank. It's been obsolete since the 70s at least already. Like, it already was. And so here we're in the final moment of its obsolescence. Trying to, like, I'm paying a $275 fee essentially monthly on the vehicle. So if I pay it off a lot faster, if I generate a bunch of money and pay it off, I'll get out of like 60 months of paying that extra $275. That's the mythology part that we're needing to get rid of, is that saddling debt on top of people, which isn't actually real. It really doesn't exist. The only way it can exist is when you count the transactions that were done and then use that to organize your town's treasury flow. And it's really not necessary. You don't have to do that. But like, the way we have towns set up as a structure, as kind of like a corporation, that's the only implementation of it that would exist. There would not be any debt or like obligation onto individual people who need lunch and a shelter to sleep in to generate some form of paying back for that. We give them the payment for it up front. They use the payment, and then that currency goes forth and is paid for by the town in a way that it brings forth the worker, because none of this is possible without a worker being brought forth to manifest the transaction, the actual activity. So it relies on the user, and it relies on the person bringing it forth in terms of things that are our actual transactions between two people. There's the person who's going to be the steward of the work, the action, and then there's the person who's going to be the user. And like, that's the whole Zen fact you end up at when you've got a professional, like somebody who's completely fixated on the profession and just making and making and making and making. And then at that point, there's a sub-profession, which is to find somebody to receive the thing that's been made, to like find a participant, find a recipient. So it depends, all of this depends on the actuality of the worker, the essential worker. Once things are a bit more automated, you won't depend on that so much. Just the actuality of the benefit that is automated doesn't rely on one individual worker anymore. And so that's going to force the removal of the mythology of money into action. The automation thing itself is, and Alan Watts was already telling us about this, and Terence McKenna did too, in their ages, that the thing that will be the final break onto removing this part of the money of mythology is the automation, the fact of so much becoming automatic that won't rely on any individual workers any longer, is that they will not be able to find a way to put people in debt for it anymore. They won't be able to sell, like this. The collapse of student debt as an idea is just like a metaphor of it. It's an image of what this is going to look like when it's no longer possible to saddle debt on people for something that's so automatic and regular and available to everybody. It'll become so automatic that no landlord or banker will be able to hold a grasp on whether it does or doesn't happen. Like the off switch, they'll lose access to the off switch. Like how your power is going to get shut off when you didn't pay for it. Like they're going to lose the ability to do that because automation is going to be so abundantly manifested. But it'd be possible without that to just let people do their business. And the meta insight on this, once I've been thinking it through this long, I get to a meta insight which says the consequence of breaking through the mythology of money is that we will return to allowing people to just be real people, to just let us start being real people again and stop being coerced into living in such a way that we are having to follow the whims of the landlord, the property manager, and the credit issuer, the loan giver, and the banker, and the property managers. Like, we will stop having to live our lives in such a way that's underneath the shadow of rule makers who are issuing us rules about the money and about the payments that are due. And we will just be able to return to being real people. We will allow society to gain its other hand back that it loses when we're clutched up in the, oh my god, you gotta pay a rent, what the fuck are you doing? You gotta go find an employer and pay these assholes called the landlords for your right to exist, like your actual citizenship in the town. We deconstruct that and return society to a place where it correctly has both of its hands in the two-handed idea of people can get to be real people again, and we no longer will have to waste all the mental energy. Like when Alan Watts said, do you understand what the cost of paying income tax is? It's this. It's the loss of your psychic energy that gets gobbled up in the process of starting out every month in the hole, in this imaginary debt hole that you have to go and earn an offset for. Like, it's all the offset that's taking that amount of what we would measure as value, monetary value. It's all backwards. It's the mental tax. It's the psychological loss of our other hand, of being real people who can live our lives for our real actions that we find valuable, the actions we really want to do that have value. So this is the opposite of like a wishy-washy communist happy world. It's a happy world where no one's forcing people into any analog of enslavement to a corporate entity, to a CEO and landlord. Once you remove that, we just get back to being real people with both our hands as a two-handed person organism.